Gender inequality in America, focusing in on the media's role in misogyny. For starters, what is feminism? Feminism is an interdisciplinary approach to issues of equality and equity based on gender, gender expression, gender identity, sex, and sexuality as understood through social theories and political activism. To be clear, any time that stereotyping, objectification, infringements of human rights, or intersectional oppression occurs, it's a feminist issue. I'll also be focusing on sexism in the media. This is dictionary.com's definition of sexism: prejudice, stereotyping, or discrimination, typically against women, on the basis of sex. "97% of big broadcasters are male-owned, limited to, but not including, CNN, etc. Women make up 51% of the United States population, while only 17% are working in Congress. Only 34 women have ever served as U.S. governors compared to 2,319 men. Former Speaker of the House in California, Nancy Pelosi, stated that when she just became Speaker of the House 20 years ago, that her youngest child was a senior in high school. Pelosi said that people still asked her who's going to be taking care of the children. If she were male, that question probably would not have been asked as frequently. The American Psychological Association has found in recent years that self-objectification has become a national epidemic, a national problem, that leads to negative consequences such as shame, self-disgust, and anxiety. Caroline Heldman, who holds a PhD and is Associate Professor of Political Science at Occidental University, stated, after hearing of the AP's newfound data, "The more likely girls are to be depressed, have eating disorders, lower confidence, lower ambition, lower cognitive function, and lower GPAs. We have a whole generation of women who are less likely to run for office and less likely to vote. My question in response to this is, how are we supposed to be building a nation that we and future generations can look up to as being free of sexism and healthy for our daughters?" The photo illustrated here is of a Victoria's Secret ad. United States advertisers spent $235.6 billion in 2009. 80% of the countries in the world have GDPs that are less than that. The number of cosmetic surgical procedures tripled between 1997 and 2007. The average facelift costs $11,429. That's enough to pay for 5 years at a community college, 2 years at a state university, or 1 year at the University of California. GDPs are the general domestic products, the total value of goods produced and services provided in a country throughout 1 year. Here are some examples of objectification of women in advertising. In the top left corner, we have an American Apparel ad that reads "Now Open," with a picture of a woman laying on her back with her legs spread open. The picture is already suggestive in itself, but the caption reveals the true meaning. The bottom left is Katy Perry, popular singer. Somehow, an advertisement for Pop Chips related back to her breasts. The BMW ad reads, "You know you're not the first, but do you really care?" This advertisement is comparing a woman to a used car. For another potato chip ad, somehow the chips were related back to her breasts. The American Psychological Association conducted a study on objectification of women. Through self-reporting questionnaires online, 381 married women living in Iran filled out this survey. In brief, the study was basically asking about how they're sexualized or self-objectified in consumer culture. The participants also happen to use the internet or be online every day. The results show that body surveillance is significant in the process of losing self-esteem, attempts at alleviating it through self-sexualizing behavior, and finally resulting in the tendency to buy products compulsively. The discussion focuses on the implications of these findings to explain the relationship among self-objectification, self-esteem, and self-sexualization behavior. This data may have been collected from women living in another country, but feelings are universal. The results are truly horrifying. The article I found was actually a study based on another study that went into the neuroscience of gender in the brain. It analyzed how the study was depicted across 5 domains of communication. One was the original scientific article. then a press release, the traditional news media, online reader comments, and blog entries. The content published was studied up to 1 month after the original article's publication. The content often resembled a form of benevolent sexism, in which praise of women's social-emotional skills compensated for their relegation for more esteemed trait domains, such as rationality and productivity. Here is a chart from the study. Behavioral manifestation refers to the way asserted skill was used. This chart is illustrating the different behavioral domains that were suggested to show a sex difference that this research may explain. It records the proportion of data units from each of the 5 data sets that mention the topics. What data or scientific study can possibly explain this distortion created by the media when these topics were exacerbated by the media taking the behavioral differences studied out of context? Not to mention that the data from the press release concluded that men have a greater affinity for sensorimotor function and spatial cognition, while women dominated the other 4 categories. The press release is shown by the red bars here. What was found to be interesting was that there were topics addressed in the media, especially the press release, that were introduced anew in the popular media without being in the original paper. Continuing on with the gender on the brain study, this data shows how the media spontaneously projects existing gender scripts onto the novel scientific information. Particularly important in this regard were the 2 meanings assigned to the words multitasking and single-task concentration. These were often positioned as directly opposed talents, with women cast as more competent at the former and men the latter. Though neither function was explicitly mentioned in the PNAS article, both were introduced in the press release in a sentence that was frequently reproduced in popular articles. On average, men are more likely to be better at learning and performing a single task at hand, like cycling or navigating directions, whereas women have superior memory and social cognition skills, making them more equipped for multitasking and creating solutions that work for a group. Please ignore the subtitles in the video on the next slide.
I hear this all the time. Well, things are getting better. I mean, things are getting better, but they're not.
Mainstream movies are generally stories of men's lives, which revolve around men. And then we have this subgenre called chick flicks, which are stories of women's lives, which, when you look at them a little more closely, you realize that they generally revolve around men's lives, too. They revolve around trying to get a man, trying to get love, get married, get pregnant.
It's my fault that I'm alone on Valentine's Day. My closest relationship is with my BlackBerry.
Right.
Thank God it vibrates.
Between 1937 and 2005, there were only 13 female protagonists in animated movies. All of them, except one, had the aspiration of finding romance.
As a culture, women are brought up to just be kind of fundamentally insecure and always looking for the time when that knight on a horse will come and rescue us or provide for us.
When it comes to female leaders in entertainment media, we see the bitchy boss who has sacrificed family and love to make it to where she is.
I said to myself, take a chance. Hire the smart fat girl.
The whole movie is about bringing her down a peg, and this is generally done by someone who is under her, a subordinate, typically a male. So that image doesn't bode well when it comes to ideas of women in leadership.